About 8 years ago, this group started as an online LinkedIn group. And then, as we mentioned, 5 years ago, we started our first inaugural event. So we wanted to take that digital connection that we have with people and bring it out to a real world connection so that we can meet each other, be in the same room, shake hands, connect a little bit deeper. So that's the whole goal. We have two things in mind. We want to bolster manufacturing, and we do that through relationship building and education. So we've got very experienced gentlemen here talking about private equity today to give us some great learning experience. And then what you all saw this morning was the relationship aspect of this whole thing. So that's the whole goal of the organization. So with that, I would like to introduce Tom Horlacher. Tom has a consulting practice focused on providing intelligence for growth. Typical projects relate to strategic planning and new product development, along with the intelligence gathering related to market assessments, competitor strategies, customer needs, and product technology. Tom has over 30 years of experience in working for and advising durable goods manufacturing companies. He was a marketing executive for Emerson in the electric motor and drive industry, serving a variety of clients in the pump compressor industries and managed key distributorship relationships. Tom led over 50 teams through successful development and implementation of strategic plans. While his primary experience is in North America, he has specific experience building partnerships and assimilating acquisitions in Europe and planning a new facility in Asia. Tom received a BS in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Michigan and an MBA from WashU. He's involved in civic and community organizations, including past president of the Board of Trustees of the Wilson School. Further, he is an adjunct instructor at Washington University. So if we could welcome Tom, please.
Appreciate those kind words, Tom. And welcome, good morning. Thank you for coming out on this cool day. So how about that? I don't know how many of you are long on knowledge of private equity and how many of you are new to private equity, but today we're going to spend a little bit of time trying to demystify that, talk about what goes on, how private equity firms seek and find relationships with companies, and what they're looking for in operational excellence beyond just financial performance. So I think we can shed some thought leadership for you there. And we will talk for 10 or 15 minutes. We're quickly going to get into a Q&A with you, and we've really set up our slides in a Q&A mode. So thank you for that. Before we jump into private equity, I did want to take a moment to speak about Association for Corporate Growth. So all three of us are from Association for Corporate Growth. It's a professional organization that has about 14,000 members around the globe with a focus on middle market M&A deal making. So business leaders focused on driving growth, and it's really, ACG St. Louis has about 350 members, and it is really a broad swath of professionals. That would include capital providers, banks, investment banks, mezzanine firms, accountants, attorneys, and corporate development folks. So a pretty broad group of professionals who are looking at ways to grow their companies, certainly through mergers and acquisitions, but also through organic growth. Too fast. Sorry about that. So ACG meets on a monthly basis, similar to this, although we have a sit-down breakfast with a speaker talking about a story, maybe from their company, which they've sold into private equity. Several entrepreneurs speak. We also have capital providers speak. We have an economist speak to us once a year. We have other programming which helps people learn how to run their businesses more effectively. And our mission, simply put, is to serve as a catalyst for business growth by providing businesses with relevant knowledge, sources of capital, and other resources. So relevant knowledge and sources of capital. And the reason we're here today, in addition to wanting to be with you and talk about private equity, is that we have a vision of creating a business climate in this region where prosperity and vitality of the community are paramount. So we are, we're here, we're interested in getting to know you, we appreciate your coming to see us. There are a few pieces of literature on the table in the back from Association for Corporate Growth. There's not 150 of them. So please take one if you're interested, and if you don't get one, please come and see me or Joe or John, and we will be happy to speak with you more about Association for Corporate Growth. So thank you for that. So on to our panel. Joe Montemani and John Hune have been kind enough to join us today. And what I would like to do first is have them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about where they're coming from.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. I'm Joe Montemani. I'm a partner with Polsinelli. My practice consists primarily of about half what I would call M&A, probably a quarter general corporate work, and then a quarter kind of other transactional work, commercial contract, joint ventures, that sort of thing. I was, earlier in my career, I spent a couple of years with in-house with Watlow Electric Manufacturing Company, where I focused specifically on M&A, transactional work on the client side or on the business side of within Watlow. And so a lot of my work today is still manufacturing focused, but through that, developed a lot of work in manufacturing M&A and with private equity groups. So that's me. That's on John.
Good morning. Happy to be here this morning. I'm John Hune. I lead a group called Compass Group here in town. It's a private equity firm based here in St. Louis. We look for businesses in manufacturing, distribution, or business services that are in the 2 to 10 million in EBITDA range. Our goal there is to partner with them, be a financial partner, but also add value operationally, strategically, etc., to help them grow to the next level of their success. We've been involved in private investing for almost 2 decades now, and we really think that the market has shifted. Some of the stories you may have heard about the big bad private equity guys that are financial engineers, that has long passed, and really private equity today is all about a partnership between a seller or a founder and how to help that organization grow to the next level. So bring resources, bring capital, whatever that might be. Another nuance for us is that we're backed by family offices. So family offices are typically business people that have made their family fortune in business some way or another, and therefore they have patience and an understanding for the business world that ebbs and flows over time. There's good years, there's bad years, and therefore the time horizon for the investment is also more flexible. So I've had a bit of experience over time, both as an entrepreneur building and selling a business. I've worked with a family to build their own family office. I've been in the corporate world doing strategic acquisitions, and I've served as an intermediary as well. So you could call me ADD, but what I'm hoping to do is bring all those experiences and maybe share a little bit more, and hopefully that perspective can help today.
Thanks, Joe and John, for being on our panel today. And I think with that intro, you get a chance to see them, who they are, where they're coming from. Just as a background for us, how many of you, just by show of hands, how many of you have had not just exposure, but relationships with private equity firms in the course of your business? Good. Good participation there, and that'll help us. So John talked a little bit about both his view on private equity and his firm in private equity, but I just thought we would start here with what is private equity? What is private equity? So I would, did you already answer that, John, or do you have a little more to do with that?
I can add color if you choose.
Yeah, I think, so I'm going for my steps, and start on my steps.
So private equity can take a lot of forms. You see a formal definition up there, but it's financial backing. I'm guessing most of you own some sort of stock or fund in a public market. It's really the same thing in a private market without public stocks, of course. It could be a minority investment designed for growth. It could be a majority investment, which they might call a controlled investment. It's interesting, when we work with our sellers, we're almost always talking about what kind of financial partnership we can bring to the relationship. As you might imagine, sometimes these conversations are started with confidentiality, and people are afraid to talk to their management teams or their employees as a whole. We encourage that conversation to really be above board and talk about how the company wants to continue to grow, continue to provide quality for their customers, continue to provide for the employees, and that continuity means that they can bring on a financial partner to do so. So that, demystifies this, who are these other people that are walking around and checking things out. So private equity can take a lot of different forms. It can start from startup companies, typically called more venture capital style. Private equity is often defined as a going concern, meaning that there's profit in an ongoing business. But again, private equity crosses all those spectrums. It can be formatted as equity, it can be formatted as debt. Again, I mentioned it can be formatted as minority or majority investment. So a lot of flexibility there, and the beauty of it is right now there's a tremendous amount of capital out there with a tremendous amount of flexibility, willing to sit down with individual owners and figure out how it might best serve them to bring growth capital or an exit transaction to them.
So with that as a background, why would you want to form a relationship with a private equity firm? We have Joe.
So, John has touched on this a little bit. Obviously, there are benefits to having backers with some additional financial capital behind them, but beyond that, especially what I see more and more emerging in private equity, a good partner which can provide kind of increased professionalism, the knowledge about the market, kind of support to actually grow the business. And so if you're thinking about a potential private equity partner, it's important to not just view it as a financial engineering type of organization. You want to look for a partner that matches with a real growth idea that kind of matches your own perspective on how where you want your business to go. And a good private equity group can provide much more than just the financial backing, whether it's the vision and capability to do a roll-up of various different businesses, to just simply understanding a broader market, like a national market, as opposed to more of a regional market. Those are kind of the things that I see. I don't know, do you want to add anything? Or?
Pretty good.
Okay.
So with those two questions answered, we're going to ask one more here before we turn it back over to you. But what attributes are needed? So John, you mentioned this maybe having a profit for a private equity firm to invest. You said, yeah, there's something to venture capital, but it's helpful if we're making money. But it's not all about making money. What else is going on?
So when you start looking at an opportunity, or when we start looking at an opportunity, there's a checklist, for lack of a better word, that we are exploring. And first, always has to be a financial performance. Does this business fit the size, scale, scope that might make sense for us? And there's no doubt that for us is a very defined space from 2 to 10 million in EBITDA. There are certainly private equity firms that work in the space smaller than that, and there are plenty of firms that work in the space larger than that. So really anywhere on the spectrum, private equity can come into play. But there's much more than just the financial performance. Certainly a business needs to be able to perform financially, but they also need to have a niche in their market. I think that's an important piece. They need to understand where they fit in the market. We like to see that they're a leader in their market, however that might be defined. Of course, you can always define a market to make yourself a leader, but it has to be reasonably broad enough that we understand that there's growth opportunity as well. Key talent. I was talking with a friend this morning, and one of the most important things is that you have a bench, as we call it, that we have a management team that can continue the business without the seller or founder if that individual is desiring to leave or retire after a transaction. It's incredibly important. We see all the time where someone says, I've got a great team, they do a great job, we're all very collaborative, and then you learn that the leader of the business, the founder of the business, has all the customer relationships. Nothing gets done without them in the office. Sad as it is to say, we like it much better when the owner lives in Florida and comes in and says, hey, everything's going fine without me. That gives us confidence that the business can continue in perpetuity without that owner if their desire is to shift. Truth be told, we love it when an owner says, hey, I want to stay involved, but I'm looking for some growth capital, I'm looking to make an acquisition, I'm wanting to grow the business, and so that's a great relationship too. But the management team is certainly a key part of that. Whether or not the management stays on for the transaction, there is flexibility there. Again, it's all about the structure, and we can probably talk a little bit more about that. And then they have to be psychologically prepared. We oftentimes will build a relationship with an owner on our own, but oftentimes there's a broker or banker involved, and that is a healthy situation because those brokers or bankers have helped that company go through that process to be ready and prepared for a transaction. It is not uncommon for us to get far into a conversation and have a potential seller determine that this is not something they're prepared to do. And while that's frustrating for everyone, I encourage those conversations to occur up front. I think the last session included some talk with CNA and others that can help prepare a business for a transition like that. What's not up here is really the fit, the cultural fit. As I mentioned, there's all sorts of organizations out there that can provide capital in the form of private equity one way or the other. Oh, here's a longer list. Am I supposed to talk about this? All right. So there's lots of other opportunities out there, and we'll clearly talk more about it. But that cultural fit is important. So I started with financial performance. Certainly that has to make sense, but we immediately go to the type of individual and the culture of the organization. If we're not comfortable with that, it doesn't make any sense to continue the conversation. And vice versa. You should not be comfortable with a partner unless you're comfortable with them. It literally is a marriage that you're going to be partners in business for a long period of time. We all know that we probably spend more time with our partners in business than we spend with our partners in life. So you got to make sure there's a good fit there.
Okay, so thank you for that level set of what's going on in the private equity world. Really, we're interested in your questions. So we would turn it over to you. We have additional slides with questions on them, but we're hoping to ask those questions, but you may have other questions. Is that Mitch back there?
It is. I guess I have to yell. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So I'm wondering, and this just goes to business planning, but especially from your perspective on the acquisition or providing funds, about the next recession. So we've had 10 years of between good and great economic growth. It's going to happen, nobody knows when, and I'm not trying to even think about prediction. But if you look at cash flows, you're looking at growth, things have been good. and then there's something out there, you don't know when and how bad, but how do you build it into your planning, or do you? It's easy to forget about. I find companies right now, things are good, they're taking their projections, it's going forward, and yet there's something out there that could disrupt it tremendously. But you being so financially, I picture discipline. I'm wondering if you built that in, or how, or that would be my question.
It makes me think of a story that we had acquired a business years ago, and this was on behalf of a publicly traded company, and it was in an end market that was very attractive. CAGR growth was somewhere around 7 to 8%. That was expected to continue. So we built a nice forecast. Those of you who know, we do all sorts of financial modeling and do a discounted cash flow and all that. And for the financial geeks in the room, the terminal value means everything in those types of calculations. So if you have a 7% annual growth for years in the future, that creates a whole lot of value. So of course the team models out that the company's grown that way in the past. The forecast is for that kind of growth to continue. And one of the board members looked at me and said, you know you're not going to grow 7% year after year after year. There's going to be some sort of event in the future, a recession, a hiccup, loss of a customer, whatever it might be. And I remember the analyst in the room at the time looked at this board member with their years of wisdom and said, what year would you like me to put that in? And of course the board member said, that's not my job. But the truth is there will be a time in the future that those hiccups come, and we're always looking to try to understand the macroeconomics of an end market. So I actually had a potential intern in my office yesterday asking me, we have a business in the electronics manufacturing space, about how the China tariffs are impacting our business. And the truth is, absolutely the China tariffs are impacting our business and our customers because the cost of our raw materials are going up. What's interesting is we also have a Mexican manufacturing facility along with the 5 that we have here in the US. And those China outlets are becoming more expensive, so we have customers wanting to give us business to do in Mexico instead of China. So while the China tariffs are impacting us on one side, we're able to use those as part of our sales tactic to bring more business in. Those are all stories that I think for most cases, the members in this room have businesses that are small enough that can fight or combat macroeconomic trends. If you're General Motors and there's less cars sold, you're going to get hurt. But if you're a local manufacturer manufacturing a product in a diversity of end markets, one end market might struggle, another could pick up. And I think that's really how we have to look at it. So we look at our businesses and ask the phrase, it sounds a little aggressive, but so what? So what are you going to do about that? If you believe, if you're in building products and you think the building boom is going to slow down, so what are you going to do about that? If we have a business that makes parts for aerospace, Boeing's a big customer, they're not making as many planes right now. So what are we going to do about that? That same business makes products for medical, and medical's been booming. So you have to balance your resources that way. But I do think the recession is out there. Depending on which economist you listen to, it's going to be soft and mild, or more aggressive in the future. But I think you have to prepare each business to be diversified enough to weather that storm.
I've had some experience doing deals in the semiconductor industry, and if you're familiar with the semiconductor industry, it's like this. I mean, every 2 years you have a giant growth and then it falls off a cliff. And one way to handle industries where you know they're going up and down from a transactional deal structure way is to share the risk a bit with the seller. So you can structure the deal through like an earn-out. An earn-out is where you reserve some of the purchase price, and depending on the future success of the business, typically over a period of 2, 3, maybe 4 years out, they would get paid similar to, depending on how you structure it, it can be gross profit, it can be revenue, it can be thresholds based on the company's earnings. You share the risk, right? And so you try to even out the purchase price through the structure of the deal.
Next question. Go ahead, Larry.
Joe or John, if you would both weigh in, one of the opportunities with private equity acquiring your business is they tend to want to build a larger platform. And one of the things that, having been in that position, what I noticed were the opportunities that came to our team members had we stayed private here in Fenton wouldn't have been there, because suddenly the really smart people had opportunities to work with other divisions, other branches, or take corporate roles. And I think that's something that a lot of business owners may not be familiar with. And I think, real life stories and just kind of a summary would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure I caught all that. Can you, sorry?
Kind of the advantage to the team when you sell to private equity. That this guy who was running a little shop or a little section here in St. Louis may suddenly have oversight over 10 plants.
Yeah, so Larry's focused on the effects on the employees and ultimately the creation of opportunity for the employees in the business that gets sold to private equity. And I think that's a great point. It touches on kind of what we mentioned in the beginning. Private equity has a reputation nationally, I think, for being sort of this big bad monster where through financial engineering, private equity comes in and they cut earnings and focus on, they cut costs and move employees. And my experience has been that it is oftentimes a huge benefit to employees. As John said, the marriage between the private equity firm and the company is hugely important for the success of the deal. In that the private equity firm's kind of ambition post-closing should meet that of the management team. And you do see opportunities as the business grows, like any business that grows, if you're an employee of that business, to take on additional responsibility and to have it enhance your career. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. And what we find is that business owners are often very focused on their business for good reason, right? They're maybe have blinders on, they're focused on the day-to-day. All of us can walk into the office and have plenty of email or projects to take care of. And part of what a private equity firm brings to the equation is an independent group of people looking at that business, looking at that market, and trying to think strategically about how to grow it. And so it may mean that there are opportunities brought that weren't seen by the current management team. It may be that M&A opportunities are there, or even customer relationships. Because we deal with hundreds of businesses, all the time we're saying, hey, you ought to talk to these guys because they can help you with that. And we try to make those connections. The other thing that I think is really important is many owners, very wisely, are concerned about their personal liabilities in business. So they have a personal guarantee on a loan. They signed their name on the dotted line for debt. We recently acquired a business, and one of the reasons that that individual was selling is that in his early 60s, he said to me, I know this business has potential, but I'm not ready to sign a lease for a bigger building that's 5, 7, 10 years. I'm not willing to put my name on the line of credit at the bank anymore. The size of the projects we're working on are big enough that they could overwhelm me if one goes bad. And so he realized that he was starting to be more conservative than the business could be. And we use the phrase, it takes the handcuffs off. When you work with private equity, you don't have a personal guarantee anymore. You may still be running that business and responsible for it all. But when the handcuffs are off, now you're willing to take a risk. You're willing to be more aggressive. You're willing to grow. And that really is part of what we try to bring to the table, is that spurt of energy and willingness to grow. With that said, it goes back to that marriage, and so it's very important to find a firm that knows your business and knows your industry and is willing to be a good partner with you. It's always easier to say what we don't do, but I can tell you our firm doesn't know biotech, it doesn't know retail, it doesn't know restaurants, it doesn't know high-tech, or software. So we don't invest in businesses that way because we don't feel we can bring value that way. But we do understand manufacturing and distribution, business services, and almost everything we do is B2B. And as we think we can be good partners for those types of businesses.
I would just reinforce what John said there. I have a client who was in a fairly prosaic manufacturing business in the upper Midwest. They got involved in some advanced technology, got on a nice growth trajectory. The founder and owner was 70-ish, maybe a little bit more. He had 2 children in the business. Sold into private equity. The 2 children continue in the business. They're in leadership roles, but a CEO has been brought in from the outside. And there are already, there are already 2 bolt-on acquisitions that have occurred. And in the course of 18 months, the company is going from a magnitude of 15 million in revenue to well over 30 million in revenue. And people at the original facility are growing with it. So I think that's a nice question, Larry, and sort of demonstrates what the power of private equity can be, as John said, to take the handcuffs off. Good. Next question. All the way in the back.
Quick question, how do you evaluate management after you have purchased it? And do you have a stable of people that you would call on, say, to replace the vice president or the president? Or how do you go about looking at the people and making a change if you don't like what you see after you sell them?
Yeah, I think everyone heard that, but the question was, how do you evaluate management after a transaction, and or do you bring in new management? The first step is we are always evaluating management, of course, but we try to do that ahead of time. So from the very get-go, management's aware that prior to closing, we're going to have a psychological assessment done on those individuals. We're going to do a background check on those individuals because we're partners and we need to make sure we're comfortable with the partnership and what we're getting into. So, and then every management team has strengths and weaknesses. I think that's understood. And we try to make sure that we have a robust team to take that company to the next level. It may not be the CEO or the president that needs a change. It may be that they are a manufacturing company and their customers are repeat customers, so they don't do very much in the sales and marketing side. Maybe we need to add a sales and marketing individual. It's not uncommon that a privately owned business might have a spouse doing the financials or running the office. For obvious reasons, if we put millions of dollars into a company, we tend to want to have financial management, different than the husband and wife, let's say. And for that reason, we might want to put a controller or a CFO into that business. But really, we try to evaluate the business as a whole, evaluate the management team as a whole, and figure out what it needs. And augmenting the management team is very common. In these scenarios where the seller is desiring to retire, sure, we might bring in an individual to fill that role. And again, it depends on the situation.
One thing that I think is interesting, and I see when I represent sellers looking at selling to a private equity firm, is sometimes you see sellers who they're 70, they want to retire, and they're talking to a private equity firm that is expecting that person to manage the firm for a few years. And I've seen private equity deals close, and the seller ends up running the business and working harder than he was before he sold the business, or she was before they sold the business. And part of that, maybe they get involved in doing additional add-on deals. And so I think that I guess it all goes back to when you're looking at a private equity firm, you want to make sure that the trajectory of the business and your time there matches sort of what the expectations of the private equity firm are, because that is a situation that I see sometimes ending poorly when one of the founders wants to go play golf and the private equity firm wants them to do 3 add-on acquisitions in the next 3 or 4 years. So.
sector? What's the current appetite for businesses in that defense sector?
If we could only predict the future, right? Wouldn't it be great? Aerospace and defense is often lumped together when you're looking at macroeconomic trends. And for us, that's still a fairly attractive sector. Joe mentioned the silicon industry and how that goes up and down. Certainly defense goes up and down as well. And there's some fundamental changes occurring, and I think that will continue to occur in the defense space. But again, I think it goes back to what exactly is the component of the business in the defense space. If they're making, I'm trying to make something up, if they're making parts for tanks, there might be more volatility based on the purchase of tanks. If they're making parts for aircraft, like we're both in military and commercial aircraft, the macroeconomics there, I think are better. I'll tell a little side stories. This was 20 years ago, but we were looking for a business to add on to a business that was in the exhibit space, the trade shows. And one of the things they looked at were companies that made badges, like the ones we're all wearing today. Well, that was in 2000, and we all know what happened in 2001 after 9/11. The exhibit and trade show industry went down fast. Interesting, that same company made security badges, a different type of badge. Security badges went up. So really, the nuances of exactly what end markets those companies are in make all the difference in the world. And I think sometimes people do research on a market and realize that we're buying more and more cars, et cetera, and assume that that's good enough. Well, it depends on what you're making for those cars, et cetera.
Any other questions?
I have a question about, if you are looking at you talk a lot about like the 70-year-old who wants to retire and play golf. If you're looking at a younger company where the goal is more for that capital for growth, how does your analysis change? Like, what do you look at differently in that younger company that you might not pay as much attention to in that more established company?
So, I mean, I think in that scenario, the management team would be, depending on what the private equity firm is looking for, but if the management team is hungry and in place, that can be a very attractive opportunity for the private equity firm. And so at that point, you've got the key management team in place, and so it's, the private equity firm, I would imagine, would focus on sort of the fundamentals of the business and whether they believe in that management team.
Yeah, absolutely. As we evaluate a company, every scenario can be accommodated. So you've all heard about diligence. It's a nightmare for a lot of folks. But we come in and really understand every part of the business. And that's a very difficult process to get through just because everyone's digging through everything. But the second part of that diligence process for us is making sure we build a strategic plan together with the owner, the seller, the management team for where we want that business to go. That includes the management team and the evaluation of the management team and what kind of organizational augmentation might we need. It also includes the market and what their interest is in acquisition for organic growth, et cetera. So a younger owner or founder that wants to continue to grow is absolutely attractive for us. Again, it might be taking the handcuffs off. We're working on a transaction right now. We're excited about it. 3 years ago, they had 20% growth, then 50% growth, and almost 80% growth this past year. And that owner is wanting a financial partner to invest heavily in the business because they simply can't support growth. So at the end of this transaction, that individual should own 40-something% of the business. He's going to have financial partners take the handcuffs off to allow that growth to continue to happen. And because of that, when cash was tight, because it was being absorbed by working capital and growth initiatives, there were some behaviors occurring that were not the best. They were buying through distribution instead of direct because they needed the terms and they couldn't afford direct. They have some financing components of their business, and there's an opportunity there as well. So sometimes having that additional capital allows you to perform differently and continue to accelerate the growth. So a young, hungry team is absolutely welcome. With that said, did a transaction 5 or 6 years ago with a gentleman who was 88 years old. He lived in Florida most of the time and didn't understand why he needed to sell the business. It was running fine. But the employees were absolutely on edge because they spent, many of them, decades of their life working in this business, and they knew he was getting older and they didn't know what was going to happen. And it was like a breath of fresh air to have a partnership come in and know that the business had continuity, to know that those employees had a future. And as Tom mentioned earlier, they joined a larger organization, so it gave them all professional development opportunities to grow in their responsibility as well.
And one of the things, and John, I'd be interested in your take on this, but my impression is that as the private equity M&A market has become more and more competitive for deals, the willingness of private equity firms to potentially do things that they historically haven't, whether that's take a minority position, whether that's partner with other organizations in an attempt to put their capital to work. I'm seeing a lot more sort of flexibility and complicated transaction structures as there's increased pressure on PE firms to put their capital to work, and there's increased competitiveness for deals. So.
Wonderful questions. Keep going. Can keep going, Tom? I mean, do you have the room until noon, or what's Go ahead.
So we've been talking about some of the things that you're looking at in a positive respect. So why don't we go ahead and look at it from a negative respect? So when do you go in and say, there are these red flags, and what do these red flags look like so that the company knows they need to be working on this before they're looking at a private equity partner?
I was wondering how long until we got a question we could answer on the slides. So. There's a variety of things that come together here. I think on the couple things that you've seen flashed up on the screen, companies that have extreme customer concentration certainly need to work through that. Or if they don't have a consistency of flow. A lot of manufacturing companies will have a customer and they keep making the same product or a similar product for that company year after year after year. That's wonderful. We call that recurring revenue. That's an attractive situation. If you're in a manufacturing business that is maybe in the service industry and you get projects one at a time, that's non-recurring or project-based revenue, and that's less attractive. But there's all sorts of nuances where you might do the same project for the same customer again and again, or you may be under a contract for multiple years, and that adds value and is attractive. What we see oftentimes in small companies is that they do a great job for their best customers, and therefore those best customers give them more work, and that's natural, and so you take care of that customer and you continue down that path, and before you know it, you realize that your top 2 customers are greater than 50% of your business. And it is important to have some diversification in your customer base. So that's a big one. We see a lack of differentiation sometimes. If you have any type of IP or any type of secret sauce, whether that be patented or just know-how, certainly those are attractive things in an organization. We talked about the management team, making sure the management team is robust enough and parts of the business so it's less reliant on the seller or the owner. Interesting, going back to the question about the younger potential seller that's looking for a partner, we would do extra work to make sure that individual was really hungry and had a fire in their belly and wanted to continue that process. Because sometimes if they get a $30 million check, their attitude changes a little bit. And we just want to make sure that that's not going to change their lifestyle to the point that they aren't comfortable going forward.
What else is up there? You got some thoughts there, Joe?
Well, we've touched on this a couple times, but I think it's worth reiterating. There's a significant due diligence process involved in these sorts of transactions where, it starts with a just typically straight up financial diligence, and there'll be a full quality earnings report. And then it gets into really any type of investigation into the business. So if you have lingering kind of employment issues or exposure there, intellectual property, any type of kind of major, or not even potentially minor, what you perceive as minor lingering issues that could come back as a liability post-closing on the private equity firm is going to be something that is going to, at a minimum, slow down the process and potentially blow up a transaction.
Just something jumped into my mind, so I want to throw it out there. Cost of admission is free, but here's your free advice. You'd be shocked how many companies have not kept their corporate registration up to date with the state. So everyone go back, make sure you got your corporate registration up to date with the state. Every year or two it shows up, but the lawyers always do a great job of checking that, and I'd say it's a 50-50 chance that the company that we are talking to do not have their corporate registrations up to date, or have minutes of meetings, or anything that has been occurring in the business over time.
Nobody ever has stocks. That's
I would just add on to what John said. Often when I'm brought into firms as they're preparing for sale or contemplating getting ready for sale, they either have large gaps in their management team, which you alluded to earlier, I guess in a positive fashion, building management team. So gaps in the management team, the whole production quality mindset, so they have control of what their output is. And then finally, often in the smaller firms, I see what I would call just a sales-driven culture. So they will sell to whoever will buy, as opposed to an industry concentration. Maybe not a customer concentration, but they find, how companies find out that they're doing well in the semiconductor industry, in the solar industry, in the medical device industry. And so you have 2 or 3 customers that you're doing well with in one industry. Why not go seek out the other companies in that industry and tell them your story of success, as opposed to just who's close to our factory or who's called in for an inquiry. So I think those are a couple of other areas. Go ahead, Craig.
I bought, operated, and sold a couple of my own manufacturing companies. And from an owner's perspective, I've learned how important it was to use an outside group in helping me reach out. And from a confidentiality standpoint, I'm bringing this up to the owners. I had a manufacturing company with 75 people. A local M&A firm helped me. But the idea was, trying to keep this whole thing confidential. I'm asking your feedback on this. But one morning, one of our custodians said, "Who was in your plant last night?" I went, "What are you talking about?" We had a trash can moved to the far side of the building, and there were 6 or 7 pizza boxes in it. And it put up a red flag because the company had flown in from Minnesota. They were viewing the company at nighttime because we didn't want any employees to know that we had the company up for sale. So the issue is the confidentiality in the process of selling a company. Even though I thought I could sell it myself, which I could have, it was so important to use an outside group that helped facilitate the process. And we ended up selling to a private equity group. Any comments on that, John and guys?
It is a constant kind of give and take between a desire from a potential buyer standpoint to want to get to know and talk to the management team, and while at the same time, from the seller perspective, the need for confidentiality, because you have to run the business and you don't want your team to be distracted. And there's really no, I would say, ironclad way to there's no rule about when you start telling people, when you don't. it's sort of up to kind of the give and take of the company, and typically the founder has a good sense of that. I strongly agree with the importance of creating a good outside team if you're interested in selling, whether that's a good and early in the process, right? Whether that's a good accounting firm to get your books in order, good working with M&A advisors, or legal professionals to help get ready for a sale. But the confidentiality thing, there's really no set rule about when you can begin to inform your employees and which employees. And it's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge in every deal I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. To tell a pizza box story, I was looking at a business in the Gulf Coast area. Took one of those tiny little planes, it feels like you're in a cigar tube, to Houston before I flew back. And I was talking with my colleague in a side-by-side seat. Nobody else was in our row. And somebody behind us heard us talking. And before I landed in St. Louis, I got a call from the seller, and essentially said, "What the hell? I thought we had confidentiality." Wasn't intentional. I'm not proud of that at all. But you have to be incredibly careful about what you're talking about and where you're talking about it. So that's one. Two, with the advent of data rooms now, a tremendous amount of information can be transmitted electronically, and a lot of review can occur ahead of time. Certainly viewing business at night is not uncommon. But we also have played the charade a little bit that we're with the bank or with the insurance company. We're coming to learn about the business, and that's why we're there. That goes back to the communication with the team. Early on, I completely understand the need to keep things confidential. We really encourage, earlier than most people want to communicate that we're thinking about bringing on a financial partner. Being an owner and saying, I'm going to sell the business or we're being acquired, those are scary words. But we often will encourage them and say, we're bringing on a financial partner so that we can continue to grow the business and support our customers. That's much more comfortable for a lot of people to say. Oftentimes the seller is rolling over and is going to retain some sort of equity in the business so they can continue that sentence and say, I'm going to continue to be an owner, I'm going to continue to lead the organization. So that's a much more comfortable situation. If you wait till the very end to tell your team and employees, it will feel like they've been betrayed, and that isn't a very good partnership for us to start in, and we really don't like doing it. Somebody had asked me, when do you bring that up? And many of you probably do an annual review of the business and a strategic planning session. I think those are great times to talk about, hey, eventually we're going to have to bring on a financial partner. Eventually we're going to have to think about these things. So it's not a shock when that conversation starts.
Time for one more?
Yeah, time for one.
Okay, good. That's awesome. Okay, yes.
What kind of valuations these days can an owner expect you to come up with? And also, we talked about this a lot, realistically, how long from the initial conversation to close? How long is that due diligence process?
So timing and valuation.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll let John address that question. But the timing issue, which is sort of more kind of the deal execution, sort of more my panel, it depends. I mean, assuming there are no regulatory authorizations or consents that are required, typically I become involved in the LOI stage, which is early, and then after the LOI, you go through a detailed legal due diligence process, which is again typically after there's been some preliminary financial diligence by the PE firm. Once the due diligence process is winding down, we start negotiating definitive purchase agreements. And depending on the size of the business, I would at least budget a matter of months. I mean, 2-3 months at an absolute minimum.
Yeah, I was actually in Dallas with a group of gentlemen discussing this the other day, and I was shocked to hear a few of them say that we are seeing more and more transactions where close has to be within 30 to 45 days. And I think that's crazy, number one. If we were faced with that decision, do you want to acquire this company, and private equity firm A knows the business or the industry well enough, they'll just write us a check in 30 days, I'd say go with it. Because again, part of this diligence process is getting to know each other better, and that's part of it. As far as valuation, horrible answer, but absolutely it depends. But I'll tell you what ends up driving valuations up or down is some of those things we talked about: recurring revenue, higher margins, growth, and oftentimes it's stated as a multiple of EBITDA. So our valuations 5 or 6 for the typical manufacturing company. Could they be 6 or 7? Sure. We've seen some valuations go to double digits on manufacturing. I think that's pushing it a little bit, but it's certainly mid to high single digits depending on size, growth, margins, recurring revenue, IP, all those types of things can drive valuations higher. And there's no doubt that there's a lot of competition right now, and it isn't a bad time to explore. And valuations do tend to go up and down over time. But really what drives it up is some of those other components. When you start at a base level, think about it as a base level, and then for every checkbox of IT, recurring revenue, great management, growth, margins, you get a little bit more.
This is going to sound like I'm venting a little bit, but one of the things that I'm seeing recently is increased time spent in financial diligence. The quality of earnings reports seem to be taking longer, and then the messages being delivered by the buyers that after we after we check the box on the QOD, we'll be closed in 30 days, right? And so the level of kind of legal diligence after the financial diligence window is shrinking, and there's increased pressure to get the definitive documents to get to close quicker. And I think it's been interesting, so, and kind of rough on me.
I just want to thank everyone for coming today. Appreciate your wonderful questions. I know Tom's going to want to speak with you again, but I just want to say we've enjoyed meeting with you. I know John and Joe are both approachable. Hopefully they can stay here for a few minutes after the session. Any follow-up questions? And if you enjoyed the content today, these are the types of topics that we either have formal presentations on at ACG or certainly in our networking sessions. These are the topics that are discussed. So thank you again for being with us.